This ad came on just before halftime on Super Bowl 58. Then the game continued and Mecole Hardman caught a game-winning 3-yard pass from Mahomes in overtime to give victory to the Chiefs. But this ad that had aired just minutes before was not just any ad. It was a political campaign ad for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that referenced a 1960 ad of his late uncle, John F. Kennedy. It was 30 seconds. It was basically copy and paste of a nostalgic ad. It cost about $7 million to air, and it was done for an independent candidate who's likely never going to win the 2024 November elections. Why? What's the point? And why spend such a large amount on a journey that's very unlikely to end up in the White House? You see, what I'm about to show you in this video has little to do with the ad itself. It's something deeper and has more to do with the history of campaign financing reforms in America, the ex-wife of a Google co-founder, something called dark money, and of course, Richard Nixon and Watergate, elections for sale. So, at first, no one knew who funded the super PAC that ran the ad, but it was later revealed to be Nicole Shanahan, the ex-wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin. She would eventually join RFK as his running mate before it all came to a halt on the 22nd of August after Kennedy sort of ended his campaign. But it was a bit strange that this even happened at all. In fact, Nicole Shanahan herself would joke that her biggest qualification for the post of vice president was her massive fortune. She might have been joking, but recently, wealthy people are becoming more and more brazen in their involvement in politics, in a way that resembles the Gilded Age, or Nixon's presidency. I really went down a rabbit hole for this one, but I think it was worth it. One of the first things I had a look into was campaign funding, and it led me to this story on a mysterious singular $64 million donation to Biden's campaign in the 2020 elections. Many believe that it's this singular donation that helped Biden win that election. But that's not the interesting part. To this day, no one knows the source of that donation. I say source, not sources, because again, it was a singular donation. This means that probably one single individual or organization may have decided the fate of the nation for the past 4 years, and no one knows who it was. Well, that wouldn't be so bad if it were actually true that no one knows who it was. You see, just like the funding of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Super Bowl ad before the reveal, it's a problem if the candidates know their donors and their donors know that the candidates know their donors, but everyone else is in the dark about this. Or in the words of investigations manager at Open Secrets, Anna Masoglia, without information about who is funding groups spending to influence elections, voters won't know who is trying to color their views. So how did the American establishment arrive at this point of obvious corruption in its election campaign finance systems? Out of several rules that guide campaign finance, 5 will help us understand why things work this way. 1. Anyone can make donations to a political candidate, as long as they donate within the stipulated maximum donation possible. For instance, an individual can donate a maximum amount of $3,300 per election to a federal candidate committee. 2. Corporations and labor organizations cannot donate to a federal candidate. They can instead set up a separate, segregated fund that will solicit for funds and coordinate with the candidate on expenditures. 3. Any individual or group can set up committees that are not authorized by the candidate. These groups are called non-connected committees, and one type of non-connected committee that is relevant to this story is called the Super PAC, or Independent Expenditure Committee. That takes us to 4. Super PACs cannot coordinate with the candidate or the candidate's committee on expenditures. Basically, they've got to do all the campaigning for the candidate on their own, and without talking to the candidate about any of these expenditures. Sure. 5. super PACs can receive unlimited amounts of donations from any individual or group. But like party committees and candidate committees, super PACs must file periodic reports showing everything about their cash flow, including who gave them money and how much they were given and how they spent said money. Right. So it all looks pretty harmless and, dare I say, foolproof. Right? Not until you pay close attention to Rule 5 again. Specifically the words, receive an unlimited amount of donations from any individual or group. This, boys and girls, is a loophole. This loophole is believed to have been used in masking the donor of the $64 million I told you about earlier. Masoglia believes that it was done using a tax-exempt non-profit organization, also known as a 501c4 group under the tax code. In the case of our secret $64 million donor, the 501c4 group is called the Impetus Fund, and it is believed to have made a $55 million donation to the non-profit arm of Biden's super PAC, Future Forward USA Action. Then, a few weeks to the 2020 elections, Future Forward moves $60 million to the main campaign committee, FF PAC. Now, if you recall, our fifth law says that the super PACs have to do periodic reports detailing all of their donors. But in this case, the donor is the Impetus Fund, a tax-exempt organization which is not required to disclose its own donors, which, spoiler alert, it didn't disclose. And you can bet your ass that this is not the only time that this dark money Matryoshka doll trick is being used in elections. In fact, in the words of campaign finance expert Craig Holman, this kind of circular laundering of dark money is a very common operation now. And in the lead-up to the 2024 elections, it's the wild, wild west for dark money spending. Money talks. Since 2010, there has been an explosion in election spending from outside sources and an explosion of dark money in campaign finance. Here's what non-party groups spent from 1990 to 2010, and here's what they spent on elections from 2010 to 2020. But that's not all. This graph shows how dark money has increased steadily from just $6 million in 2010 to a total of $2.6 billion in all the other cycles up till 2022. But why are we measuring from 2010? Why not 2015, or the 70s, or any other year? 2 words. Citizens United. No, I'm not talking about an English football rivalry. I'm talking about the landmark decision by the United States Supreme Court in 2010. To summarize an otherwise convoluted and legal jargon-heavy backstory, Citizens United v. FEC basically ruled that corporations were people and money was speech. And since freedom of speech is a right protected under the Constitution, these corporations were free to spend obscene amounts of money as long as it was all disclosed. As you can imagine, this ruling rolled back decades of campaign finance laws, from Teddy Roosevelt to just after the Watergate scandal. You see, Teddy Roosevelt himself was wary of the influence corporations could wield on politics. He pushed for reforms in 1905, which led to the Tillman Act of 1907, an act that sought to push out corporations from elections. But by 1971, things were messy again, and a new campaign finance reform called FECA would make it mandatory to disclose details of campaign contributions above $100. It was to be passed on the 7th of April, and just as that date drew closer, several men flew into Washington with briefcases of money that would go to the campaign for the re-election of the president, Richard Nixon. This campaign body, often referred to by its acronym CREEP, would put these rush-hour campaign funds to use in many ways, and one of them would end up being Watergate. After the fallout from Watergate, the famous "follow the money" phrase reportedly said by the Watergate whistleblower, Deep Throat was perhaps symbolic. The campaign funders who wanted to stay anonymous were eventually revealed, and many corporations and heads of corporations and industries, from American Airlines to the dairy industry, were involved. Nixon himself had favored policies that favored the dairy industry. It was clear what was happening. Money was talking. Fast forward to today, and just as we've seen, corporations and powerful people, through Citizens United, have gained the ability to fund super PACs with unlimited amounts. And if they wanted to, they could stay anonymous through dark money funding by 501c3s. And time again, they have. The implication of all this is damning. If Richard Nixon's creep did their operations today, almost all of their illegal activities would have been legal. Unlimited funding, check. Anonymous funders, check. Funding from wealthy people with vested interests and policies, check. The 2024 presidential elections are already as bad as anyone expects it to be in terms of ridiculous campaign finance figures. So you have to ask yourself, is it even possible to have options outside of the two big parties when they're in your face all day, every day? How can your vote be your voice when Citizens United has said that money is speech? Like a self-fulfilling prophecy, money is talking, and the person with the most free speech is the person with the most money. And of course, most Americans agree that this law should not exist. But that's not the first thing most Americans agree on, but the judiciary turns a deaf ear to. And so you have to ask the question, why? Why is the American judiciary ever at odds with the opinions of the people, even when it's popular? And this discovery is a topic for a whole other episode.